December 1st.
Colored lights!
White lights.
Patton and Logan shared an exasperated look. Meanwhile, Janus and Remus watched on in confusion. No matter how far they had come in their relations with one another, Virgil and Roman still had a tendency to bicker when they disagreed. Now, what was supposed to be a fun day of putting up Christmas decorations had devolved into waiting on the two of them to come to an agreement.
Multicolored lights make the tree look more cheerful and add life to the tree.
Virgil scoffed.
They're an eyesore. White lights are elegant, soothing, and much easier on the eyes.
Roman seemed to take the words as a personal affront.
An eyesore? They most certainly are not. They are beautiful and far more interesting than boring white lights.
Boring? You certainly didn't seem to think that about the color when you chose your uniform.
Nor did you think colors were an eyesore when you chose your jacket.
Enough!
Patton looked between the two of them.
This is supposed to be fun! I can understand having different opinions, but it has been a long time since one of your arguments has resulted in you two directly insulting each other. You owe each other an apology, right now!
The pair in question hung their heads, but after a moment, Roman cleared his throat.
I apologize, Virgil. I actually quite like your jacket.
Virgil nodded before lifting his head.
I'm sorry too. And your uniform is quite elegant.
Content with the sincere apologies, Patton looked between them.
Now, it's time to come up with a compromise. We could either wrap the stair rail in one color of lights and the tree in another,
He glanced between the tree and the box full of lights.
or we could put a mixture of colored and white lights on both.
Well, having the lights separated would offset the room.
Roman nodded.
I must agree with Virgil there.
Patton smiled.
So we can all agree to do a mixture of colored lights on both the tree and the stair rail?
Logan, Janus, and Remus nodded swiftly, and after a reluctant look at one another, Roman and Virgil did the same. Something told Patton, however, that they had not heard the last word about the lights. December 3rd, 11:15 a.m. Roman sighed as he walked down the stairs and into the common room. There weren't nearly enough colored lights. The mixture of white lights that Virgil had insisted upon made the room look almost washed out. If he was being honest, he had no idea why his friend liked the white lights, as dull and boring as they were. Glancing around, he noted that no one was nearby. If he were to change all the lights to color now, he was almost certain that no one would notice. The colored lights already overpowered the white ones to some degree, and the room would no longer look as washed out. A bonus would be Virgil realizing he had been wrong to insist that they have white lights at all. Making sure once again that no one was around, he snapped his fingers, and in an instant the lights changed. Where once white and washed out colors were shown, there were now vibrant hues of red, orange, blue, green, and even purple. Heading into the kitchen, a smile laced Princey's face. There was no way even Virgil would have something to say about the change, if he noticed it at all. December 3rd, 4:30 p.m. Virgil stretched his arms, yawning from his afternoon nap, but let his arms fall when he opened the bedroom door. Something was off, though he didn't know what at first, so he began making his way towards the stairs. The moment he caught sight of the railing, however, he knew exactly what was wrong. At some point, the mixed lights had been changed to multicolored only, and as he had predicted, their various hues made the room look almost cluttered and claustrophobic. It was hard to tell where one set of decorations ended and the other began, as they all seemed to run together. Glancing over the railing, he saw Roman sitting at the table, sorting through some holiday video ideas for Thomas. Virgil immediately knew that the prince was behind the change, and if he wanted to be petty and change the lights under his nose, anxiety would do the same. With a smirk, he snapped his fingers, and all the lights changed to white, instantly changing the cluttered mess to a winter wonderland. The white lights twinkled like starlight on the snow, and properly illuminated the already colorful decorations, so they could be seen properly. He watched as Roman's head shot up from his work, as he glanced around at the sudden change. A moment later, he yelled out,
Virgil, I swear that
There's no need to shout. I'm right here.
The prince whipped around to face him as he reached the bottom of the stairs, and he all but purred his next words.
I thought since you'd had your turn with all colored lights, it was my turn with all white lights.
Roman got to his feet.
Virgil, this looks atrocious! Where's the color? The cheer?
On the last word, he snapped his fingers, and the lights became multicolored once more.
This room looks like a cluttered mess.
He snapped his own fingers, and the white lights returned.
Now, however, you can see where each decoration ends and the other begins. Besides, the twinkling looks like falling snow. Even you can't deny that.
Roman pretended not to notice the others who had appeared on the stairs.
Oh, yes I can.
With a snap, the lights changed back to color.
Now stop. This is not a Sleeping Beauty situation.
He watched as Virgil snapped his fingers once more, not paying any more attention to the others than he was.
You're the one that started this, Sir Sing-a-Lot.
Princey shook his head, changing the lights back to their multicolored state.
Because I want the room to look nice, Hot Topic.
A familiar mischievous glitter entered his opponent's eyes as he placed his hands in the air.
Alright, but be aware, you're the one who's starting this. So, watch out.
He swallowed hard as Virgil began to walk away.
What does that even mean?
His friend chuckled wryly.
I guess you could call this a declaration of war. So just watch out.
As Virgil disappeared back up the stairs, he shared a glance with the others. They all knew what that meant. He had seen the changing of the light's color as a jovial trick or a joke. One might even be inclined to say that he had seen it as a prank. And in that moment, Roman knew what he had done. He had just pushed Virgil into starting a Christmas prank war, and there was no telling where it would go or how it would end. December 7th. Patton knew a pseudo-prank war had broken out, but something told him this one would not be as ruthless as the previous one. No one wanted to actually ruin the holidays, so they would more than likely keep their pranks lighthearted and jovial. Ensuring his would remain just as fun, Morality had decided that while the others slept, he would decorate their bedroom doors with different decorations. The catch was, however, he would not be using the proper colors on each door. For example, Virgil's was red and white, covered in multicolored lights. Equally, Roman's was covered in purple and silver plaid wrapping paper, with all white lights. Patton had covered his own door in yellow and black decorations, and lights of all kinds, while Janus's door sported his light blue coloration, speckled with snowflakes and multicolored lights. Finally, Logan's was green and gold, with colored lights, and Remus's was a dark blue, with white lights only. Patton stepped back as he hung the last strands of lights in garland to admire his work. All of the doors looked festive and cheerful in their own right, but the others would more than likely have something to say about the choice of colors. Unfortunately for them, Patton had placed a spell on the decorations, meaning they could only be removed or changed by him. Satisfied with the result, he headed back to his own room to get some rest and await the reactions of his colleagues. Janus stretched as he woke, ready to head down to the commons, but also concerned by what he might see there. He had learned long ago not to take Virgil's warnings lightly. If he was angry or determined enough, he would exact his revenge, even if it was over something as trivial as the color of Christmas lights. Worried that something may be waiting for them in the corridor, he opened his door slowly, but what he saw merely confused him. He hadn't been staying with the light sides for long, but he did know whose door was whose. As he looked at them, however, he couldn't help but notice that each bore colors and a design which would better suit one of the others. Even his yellow and black design didn't rest upon his own door. He stared at the door for a moment before it clicked. If his pattern was on a different door, what was on his? Stepping gently into the corridor, so as not to potentially trigger any pranks which had been set up during the night, he turned to face his own door. Blinking, he took in what he saw. Light blue decorations, with what appeared to be puppies playing in the snow, adorned his door, with only multicolored lights. There was no question that the design before him belonged on Patton's door, but it left him to wonder who would pull such a joke. He had very little time to think over the question before another door opened, and he turned to see Virgil wearing the same confused expression he'd had only moments before. His eyes remained locked on Roman's door, which looked as if anxiety had been the one to decorate it. A moment later, he left his room, closing the door and turning to look at it.
Somehow, I'm not surprised.
By the prank?
He turned to look at Janus, as if only just realizing he was there.
Huh. No, I meant that of all the sides, my door would look like Roman's.
He sighed.
More than likely a bit of revenge for our collaboration in the last prank war. That, or it was done to help us understand one another better after our disagreement over the lights.
Janus nodded.
So, who do you think pulled the prank?
Virgil glanced around at each of the doors.
Considering how harmless the prank is, I would say either Patton or Logan, but I'm leaning more towards Logan.
When Janus gave him a confused look, Virgil chuckled.
Look at how systematically they were switched. Roman and I, Logan and Remus, you and Patton. There's no deviation from what's expected from a switch like this. That also rules out Roman, and considering how tame the decorations are, that rules out Remus.
He smiled.
I was avidly against the colored lights, so why would I put them on my own door? And you seem genuine in your confusion, so I doubt that it was you.
Janus struggled for a moment to come up with a rebuttal, but finally he settled on,
Logan has certainly rubbed off on you, hasn't he?
Virgil shrugged.
All of the light sides have. I've just found that if I put my observations in a more logical format like Logan, I tend to sound less offensive.
I'll have to try that.
Anxiety looked like he wanted to respond, but he swiftly changed course as Logic himself stepped into the hall.
Nice prank, Specs.
Prank?
He glanced around as if only just noticing the doors.
This wasn't me.
Virgil seemed taken aback by the statement.
But
If I were to pull this prank, I would have made a point not to be so systematic when switching the colors and the designs, as I know that would be an obvious giveaway that I've been the one to pull it.
Janus chuckled.
Looks like your well-thought-out observations need to be rethought there, Virg.
The one in question simply nodded.
then it looks like I'm not the only one who's taken some ideas from Logan.
He glanced around at the doors once more.
In that case, my only other guess would be Patton for this prank.
Logan dipped his head at the idea.
I must agree. There's an air of innocence around this prank, one that I think only Patton would be able to pull off.
He gave a look of disdain to his door.
I just wish he had chosen any other design for my door.
As if on cue, Remus's flirtatious tone joined in on the conversation.
Oh, come on, Specs. I think your door looks great.
He laughed slightly.
Besides, green and black aren't that different from blue and black.
Janus smiled.
He does have a point. At least you don't have a polar opposite scheme like Virgil and Roman.
He glanced over to his own room.
And I can't see you being happy with snowboarding puppies either.
Logic cast his gaze around once more.
I suppose you have a point there,
He gave a smirk to Virgil, something that was out of character for the teacher.
and it's certainly better than, say, hot pink.
Anxiety ran his hands down his face.
Don't remind me. I would gladly take white and red over that any day.
White and red? Why does your door look like it should be mine?
Everyone turned to face the prince as he stepped out of his own room. A moment later, realization seemed to cross his expression, and he turned to face his own door. Sighing, his words mirrored Virgil's from only a few minutes before.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
Janus chuckled.
Ironically, Virgil said the same thing.
Roman glanced over to his friend before responding.
It makes sense. We were a team in the last prank war, and we started this one, so us being pranked as a unit is to be expected.
Logan nodded slowly.
If memory serves, there were a few like that in the last prank war, such as the door handles and your rooms being repainted.
The pair in question glared over at Logic, but it was Virgil who spoke.
Don't act ignorant, you had a part to play in both of those.
A giggle met the words.
So did I.
Roman was the one to respond to Patton's words.
Yes, I have a feeling you were behind this prank.
The one in question attempted to play coy.
Me?
Janus chuckled slightly.
Nice try, Pat, but lying doesn't really suit you. We already figured out it wasn't any of us. And by we, I mean Logan and Virgil figured out it wasn't any of us.
He half expected Morality to look crestfallen that his prank had been figured out, but a smile still laced his features.
Well, secrecy wasn't really the point of this prank.
Virgil turned to face him.
I assume it was to get us to see that no one's way of decorating is wrong.
Well, that was a happy accident.
Patton had a mischievous glimmer to his eyes.
In truth, the best part of the prank is that I'm the only one who can change the decorations, and I have no intention of doing so immediately.
With one last smile, he made his way down the steps, supposedly to go and make breakfast, leaving the others to stare at one another as they took in what had just been said. One by one, they attempted to pull at their decorations, but as Patton had suggested, they didn't budge. Janus opened his mouth to say something, but a familiar tugging at his shoulders told them that Thomas wanted their attention, and judging by the others' expressions, they were being summoned as well. One by one, they sinked into the real world, where Thomas was waiting for them.
I'm going to cut to the chase. Why did I wake up to my Christmas tree looking like the 6 of you had decorated it?
They all looked over to the tree, which very clearly bore their colors and designs in different places. But more than that, so did the lights in the rest of the apartment. Rather than responding, each of the others turned to look at Patton, who spoke with a giggle.
I'll explain my part in all of this after Roman and Virgil explain theirs.
A moment later, all eyes were on the trickster duo, but it was Roman who spoke.
Virgil and I might have had a slight disagreement over the Christmas decorations in the Mind Palace.
Virgil picked up where he had left off.
Which in turn led to me declaring a holiday prank war.
Thomas blinked at them before turning to Patton, who spoke with a smile.
And I decided to decorate everyone's doors with their own colors, but I couldn't leave you out, kiddo. Now your apartment looks like the Mind Palace.
Thomas looked around, nodding slowly.
A holiday prank war. This can only end well.
December 14th. Roman huffed. He had a prank in mind. He'd had one in mind for a few days now, but he didn't want to make it seem like he was copying. He had been planning to change the colors of everyone's stockings, but before he had the chance, he had woken up to Patton having decorated everyone's doors. The catch was, however, that he had switched up the colors, so Roman had decided not to play his stocking switch prank. Meanwhile, his mind had been reeling to come up with another prank to play. He had to get Virgil before Virgil got him. Finally, an idea flared in his mind, like a candle being struck into incandescence. It would take some time to do, but it would be just as lighthearted as Patton's prank, if not more so. Sitting down at his desk, he began to sketch up drafts before setting to work. December 15th, 5 a.m. Roman tiptoed out of his room, making sure his now decorated door closed silently behind him. He had finished most of the preparation for his prank, but the setup was going to be the more difficult part. It was one of the reasons he was forced to get up so early. He needed the others to be oblivious to his movements, but the ones he truly needed would already be up. Entering the commons, he smiled as Patton's husky Cloud, who he had gotten the Christmas before, came bounding up to him, tail wagging. Bending down, he pet the dog's face.
Hey, Cloud, I have a gift for you.
Once he had given Cloud his gift, he moved on to Scales, the snake Janus had been given at the same time Patton had received Cloud. After that, it was on to Babina the octopus. Roman still couldn't believe that his brother had an octopus. Moreover, Babina's gift had been the hardest to make, but he had managed to pull it off in the end. Finally, was the pet Roman was the most worried about. He knew how protective Virgil was of Amaya, and how strict he was when it came to loopholes with the no pets rule. Still, like Logan before him, he deemed this a worthy exception to the rule, and set out in search of the feline. Finally, he found her lounging on the back of the sofa. She lifted her head as he approached, almost as if to warn him of what her owner would do if he got any closer.
Come now, Amaya. I've no intention of changing your color or taking you away from Virgil.
He held out her gift.
You let me give you this, I will sneak some extra treats for you after breakfast.
Amaya's ears perked up, and she jumped down onto the cushions, nuzzling his arm as if to give him permission to continue. Once she had her gift, he sat back with a smile on his face.
You look quite fetching, Amaya, and something tells me Virgil will think so too.
December 15th, 6 a.m. Patton stretched his arms as he walked out of his room, heading for the kitchen to make breakfast. He was focused solely on his path, until a certain dog brushed up against his leg.
Good morning, Cloud. How are you?
Morality came to an abrupt halt when his eyes fell upon his precious puppy.
Oh, Cloud, you look so handsome and festive!
Patton had no idea who had made it, nor how they had managed to get Cloud to stay still long enough to put it on him. But he now wore a dog-sized version of his own Christmas sweater he'd gotten a few years ago. December 15th, 10 a.m. Virgil was a bit surprised when he woke up and Amaya wasn't curled up at the foot of his bed, and a feeling of dread washed over him. The last 2 times she had gone missing like this had resulted in either her fur being dyed or her being distressed from being separated from her owner. He took in a deep breath, trying to calm his thoughts. There was always a chance that someone who had gotten up before him had filled her food bowl, and she had simply woken up before him. Getting to his feet, he threw his jacket around his shoulders before heading out of his room towards the commons. He could hear the others chatting amiably in the other room as he made his way down the steps, and from what he heard, something had them rather excited. Their voices were higher in pitch, and the speed at which they spoke was faster than usual. Reaching the bottom of the stairs, the others were quick to turn in his direction, but it was Patton who addressed him first.
Come look at this!
Virgil lifted an eyebrow as he made his way over.
What has all of you keyed up so early?
As he asked the question, he caught sight of Janus holding Scales, who for some reason was wearing something black and yellow. But Virgil couldn't tell what it was from where he was standing. In the same moment, he felt Cloud nuzzle up against his legs, and looking down, he was shocked to see the dog clad in what appeared to be Patton's Christmas sweater. Suddenly, he realized what Scales must have been wearing, a miniature version of Janus's sweater. Walking towards the kitchen, he could now see Remus, who was holding Bobina, and despite being aquatic, was somehow also wearing a sweater. Finally, his eyes rested upon Amaya, and a smile graced his lips, as he realized why she hadn't been present when he woke up. She was wearing a tiny version of the first iteration of his Christmas sweater, which was complemented nicely by her collar. Kneeling down, he placed a hand on the floor, and a moment later, Amaya had walked up it and was draped around his shoulders.
I have to admit, I was worried about what might have been done to you, but this is adorably acceptable.
Patton's voice was quick to follow his own.
They all look so cute!
He paused briefly.
I wonder who did this.
Virgil chuckled lightly, while Amaya nibbled at his ear.
Something tells me that I know.
When his words were met with confused glances, he continued.
Well, let me ask you this. Who made the sweaters the first time?
Janus and Remus still seemed confused, but realization dawned in Patton and Logan's eyes as they turned to face Roman. After a moment, he smiled.
I honestly thought it would take you guys a little longer to figure out it was me. Either way, I'm glad you all like the sweaters.
He paused, turning to look at Virgil.
And that you don't consider this breaking the rules.
Anxiety chuckled at the words.
Scared, Sir Sing-a-Lot?
He didn't give the prince a chance to respond.
In all seriousness, I think these are great. When did you have time to make them?
Roman rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly.
Considering how small most of them are, it didn't take long. The part that took the longest was coming up with the prank.
He sighed.
I originally was going to change the color of everyone's stockings, but that wouldn't have seemed very creative after Patton's prank a few days ago.
Aw, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, kiddo.
The prince didn't seem bothered.
No worries. It made me look at my prank a little more, and I think this is far better than changing the stocking colors.
The others gave their forms of agreement before Roman looked up.
Oh, I almost forgot something. I'll be right back.
The others didn't have time to respond before he darted up the steps 2 at a time, leaving the others to talk with one another.
What I want to know is how Roman managed to get a sweater on Bobina. I can see how he would manage such a feat with a dog, cat, or even a snake. But an octopus?
Virgil shrugged at Logan's words.
This is Roman we're talking about here. If there is one thing I have learned about him over the years, it's that if he's determined to do something, it will get done.
Janus nodded.
I second that.
He glanced over to Remus.
Apparently it's a family trait.
Before anyone else could respond, Roman came darting back down the stairs.
I forgot that I'd made these to go with the sweaters.
He handed each of the pet owners a small stocking. Scales's was yellow, with an S and holographic foil, which reflected a rainbow similar to his scales. Bobina's was green and pink, with a black bee on the front, and Cloud's was white and silver, with a light blue C on the front. Finally, there was Amaya's. It had a purple A on the front, but Virgil couldn't help but laugh at the color choice of the stocking itself.
Black and green. Really?
Remus shot him a playful glare.
What does everyone have against black and green?
Virgil shook his head.
It has nothing to do with you, Remus.
He glanced down at the stocking.
In the first prank war, Thomas dyed Amaya green, and so the color has been associated with her even long after her coat turned back to black.
Roman chuckled.
I'm sorry, Virg, I couldn't resist.
No worries.
Together, the pet owners hung their pet stockings next to theirs. December 17th. Roman glanced around at the others.
It just isn't Christmas until we watch a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Janus looked over in confusion.
What is a Charlie Brown Christmas?
Princey looked at him in horror.
It's only one of the most amazing Christmas specials ever made.
This time it was Remus who piped up.
So, it's like a movie?
Yes.
Roman shook his head.
I can't believe the two of you have never seen it. We simply have to watch it now.
Virgil got up from where he had been lounging on the couch.
Then let's go get the DVD, Sir Sing-a-Lot.
The prince smiled as the pair made their way into the other room to grab the TV special they watched every year.
Vince QueenEioldd did an amazing job on the soundtrack, and you can't convince me otherwise.
I wasn't going to try.
Virgil chuckled.
On his soundtrack, I have to say that I like his cover of O Tannenbaum.
Roman nodded.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
He paused for a moment.
Let me guess. You like it because of the piano in that piece.
Anxiety shrugged with a smirk.
Guilty as charged.
The pair ceased their conversation as they began searching for the DVD in question until Princey finally came across it. Opening the case to make sure the disc was intact, he was shocked by what he saw.
Virg, do you know who the last one to watch this was?
He shook his head.
No. Why?
It has the wrong disc.
He glanced around.
Can you check the case for A Muppet's Christmas Carol to see if it's in there?
Virgil rummaged through the DVDs until he found the case in question, but swiftly shook his head.
Nope. This one has Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Roman was going to respond when his friend continued.
Hold on.
He started laughing.
When we switched all the DVDs back after Patton's mix-up during the first prank war, did we switch the Christmas DVDs back?
The prince pondered the question for a moment before beginning to laugh himself.
I don't think we did, actually.
In that case, I guess you could say Patton's prank is the gift that keeps on giving.
Roman chuckled.
I guess so.
He glanced around.
Well, the only way we're going to find this DVD is if we check every case.
Rolling their eyes, the pair of them set to work. It had been about 15 minutes when the others finally came looking for them, and it was Logan who saw them first.
Pray tell, what are you two doing?
Virgil chuckled.
You remember Patton's DVD switch prank?
Yes, why?
This time, it was Princey who spoke.
Well, when we put all the DVDs back in their correct case, we forgot to fix the Christmas DVDs.
As if summoned, Patton's head popped into the room.
What happened?
Anxiety didn't seem capable of keeping the laughter from his tone.
You didn't mean to, but you got us good for the holiday prank war.
How so? I haven't done anything.
Logic straightened his glasses.
Apparently, we forgot to rearrange the Christmas DVDs after the previous prank war.
Patton broke out into giggles.
Well, it was an unintended prank, but if it works, it works.
Roman was about to speak, but Virgil beat him to it.
Hey, I found a Charlie Brown Christmas. It was in the case for A Year Without a Santa Claus.
The prince smiled.
Well, that's good at least. But we should probably finish rearranging the other DVDs before we watch it.
Fair point.
The four of them sat down and sorted through the discs, as they had in the past, before heading back to join Janus and Remus in the common room to watch the film. December 24th. In the early hours of the morning, before anyone was awake, Thomas had made a point to sneak into the Mind Palace. The changes he was making were minor, but something told him that they would elicit extreme results. Knowing he couldn't stick around to see the outcomes of his joke, he made a point to set up a few hidden cameras so he could watch the chaos unfold from the comfort of the real world. Double-checking that everything was in place and that the cameras were working, he did one last scope of the mindscape. Satisfied with his work, he synced back into the real world to wait for one or more of the sides to trigger the motion sensor cameras. Patton yawned as he placed his glasses on the bridge of his nose, climbing out of bed as he did so. The others would be up soon, so that meant he needed to get up and begin making breakfast, so it would be ready for them when they woke. Once in the kitchen, he made quick work of the pancakes, bacon, and coffee for the others. After about 30 minutes, he heard voices from the second floor, though he was unable to make out what they were saying until they got to the stairs.
Honestly, I'm surprised we didn't wake up to a prank of some kind.
Virgil was quick to respond to Roman, and Patton was glad that the two of them were no longer bickering.
Same here. The DVD prank wasn't really intentional, so that means no one's pulled a prank in almost a week.
The pair paused, both in their conversation and the doorway to the kitchen, as Patton greeted them.
Good morning, kiddos!
Good morning.
The pair of them said the words simultaneously, before Roman continued.
Have you seen any signs of a prank, Pat?
The one in question shook his head.
Can't say I have. I'm guessing you haven't either?
Before they could respond, Remus's voice echoed from the stairs in a sing-song tone.
Roman and Virgil sitting in a tree. K-I-S-S-I-N-G!
The three of them looked up at him in confusion, but Roman and Virgil wore varying levels of disgust, but it was the latter who spoke.
What the hell are you talking about?
Janus appeared a few steps above Remus, and he was clearly trying to stifle a laugh.
They would make a cute couple.
Now Roman almost growled up at them.
This is ridiculous. What are you two talking about?
Remus giggled.
Now, brother mine. There's no need to get angry.
A smirk laced his features.
After all, it's not our fault that the two of you chose to stand under the mistletoe together.
Patton tried not to giggle as he watched the pair look up, and in an instant they sprang away from one another, sharing a look of revulsion.
No, absolutely not.
Roman nodded.
Finally, something the two of us can agree on.
Reaching the bottom of the stairs, Remus feigned innocence.
Oh, come on. I thought it was tradition. If anyone is caught under the mistletoe, they have to kiss.
Before Virgil or Roman could respond, Logan began making his way down the steps, nose in a book and completely oblivious to the situation.
From my understanding of the holiday, that is in fact correct.
No!
The word was shouted in unison by the two who now stood defensively at least 12 feet from one another, causing Logan to finally look up.
Sorry if that angers you, but it is tradition.
He trailed off for a moment, as his eyes rested upon the mistletoe in the doorway to the kitchen.
I see. Your reactions make much more sense now.
Virgil shook his head at the comment.
Who thought it would be funny to put this up?
I'm not sure,
Janus chuckled.
but now I'd wish I'd been the one to think of it. It's quite amusing.
A grin crept onto Patton's lips as he noticed something. Janus and Remus stood at the base of the steps, and something hung above their heads.
It looks like Virgil and Roman aren't the only victims of this prank.
One by one, the others turned to look at Janus and Remus. Meanwhile, the pair in question glanced up to see the mistletoe which hung above them as well. Patton could hear Virgil and Roman snickering as Remus puckered his lips, but it was clear that Janus wasn't having any of it. Much like the pair he had been mocking a few moments before, he jumped away from his counterpart.
Nope, we are not doing that.
Remus stood back up, placing his hands on his hips.
But it's tradition!
Janus shook his head, pointing to the others.
Virgil and Roman are more likely to partake in this tradition than us, and they jumped away from each other as if they still hated each other.
Logan straightened his glasses.
I was unaware that the probability percentages could go into the negatives.
When he received odd looks, he continued.
The probability of Roman and Virgil participating in this tradition is 0%. So for the two of you to be less likely, the percentage would have to be in the negatives.
Patton giggled at Logan's attempt at a joke, before trying to help the others to feel a bit more comfortable.
This was funny. Whose prank was it?
Virgil shook his head.
I wouldn't be so reckless as to get caught in one of my own pranks, so it wasn't me.
Roman nodded.
I have to agree with Hot Topic here. It wasn't me either.
Both Janus and Remus shook their heads, prompting Logan to speak once more.
If it wasn't the four of you, I can confidently say it's not like Patton to pull a prank like this. And I certainly didn't do it.
Their attention was drawn to Virgil next.
Then that leaves only one culprit. Thomas.
Sharing a few glances, they synced into the real world, and before they could say anything, their host began laughing hysterically. It was only then that they noticed the CCTV footage of the Mind Palace, which was clearly displayed on the television. Roman glared over at Thomas.
You hid cameras?
He shook his head as the laughter grew louder.
Oh, why am I surprised?
After a few moments, their host seemed to regain some of his bearings.
I'm sorry.
He turned to Janus and Remus.
The looks on your faces when you saw the mistletoe, priceless.
Now he turned his attention to Roman and Virgil.
And the way you two jumped away from each other, it was almost like you thought the other person was rabid.
As Thomas continued laughing, and they watched the replay of the prank on the TV, the sides, even those who had been victims of the prank, were beginning to smile, until Virgil finally spoke.
Alright, I have to admit, that was pretty funny.
The others nodded in agreement as Roman piped up.
It was, but can you please come back to the Mind Palace and take down the mistletoe?
Virgil nodded.
Actually, with Christmas being tomorrow, I suggest we bring an end to this holiday prank war. That way, we're not all on edge and we can actually enjoy our Christmas.
As agreements were given, everyone synced back into the Mind Palace to return it to its state before the pranks began. The others made a point to stand well back as Thomas took down the mistletoe. Patton didn't take down the decorations on the bedroom doors, but he did switch them around for the others. Finally, with a nod, Virgil and Roman snapped their fingers simultaneously, and the lights on the tree and stair rail returned to being a mix of white and colored lights. Overall, it was shaping up to be a great Christmas.